Hey everybody, this is PKFT1 here. This is our first discussion video. I'm sitting here with Blair. And if you don't know us, we're the two who primarily worked on the Persona 5 Royal summary and parody video, along with Burning Skylark. But today we're just going to sit here and kind of talk about the Persona series in general, kind of where we got our start, as well as the video that we made. So why don't you introduce yourself, Blair?
Okay, so I have a couple different names, but I primarily go by Breakneck Blur, and you can find me on either Tumblr. I also run just a silly blog on the side too. That was back in 2013, I think. Awkward Sonic photos, where I just find stupid screen caps of the game and I just post them online. That one, really nothing much to that one, but it's there. But I got a lot of following from that back in the day. I still update it occasionally. I've kind of been absent for a long time. But I do a lot of art on the side, so I do freelancing. I have a bachelor's degree. I actually do part-time at Hallmark. I made some ornaments for them, so I worked in the keepsake department, and I have a few ornaments coming out in October that I helped work on. And then I also have an Instagram called Tumble Illustrations, and I have a website too. So I do a lot of art on the side, and I do sculpting. So that's primarily what I do. So this was a first for me, doing something on YouTube.
Yeah, and I mean, me myself, this is a new YouTube channel for me. I've done things in the past, just personal things that never really took off, but this is the first for me to do anything related to gaming, which I would say over the past few years has kind of become, I don't know, sadly more of a passion for me. I don't know if it's a good thing or not. My background is primarily in video, so that's what I'm studying at school currently. So I hope people enjoyed the effort we put in for something that was, I wouldn't say it was a low quality video by any stretch of the imagination, because there was a lot of effort that was put into it. But I mean, it's essentially PNGs that are just being pushed around, and it's like a puppet animation. I don't even consider it real animation.
You would not believe the background work we did. You'd think the animation was the hardest part, but really a lot of it was just getting the samples or workaround to get the models was ridiculous. And we probably could have found a way easier way to do it, but
well, it wasn't until I don't know how far we were into production when I realized there was the content replacement tool in Photoshop, and I felt like such an idiot.
Oh my gosh,
the content aware tool.
I'm an artist, and I didn't even know that tool existed because I'm an idiot. So I couldn't even tell you that. But yeah, half the backgrounds we recreated by hand, cutting out the characters, we drew over the background by hand, like idiots.
Yeah, well, I was using the clone tool for a lot of stuff, which was fine in some cases, like you needed to. Anyhow, I'm getting off subject, but the point is, yeah, so Blur and I spent a lot of time working on the backgrounds. That's essentially that. Anyhow, let's kind of get into what our discussion was going to be primarily about, which is we wanted to talk about the Persona series in general, where we got our start. We're not familiar with the Persona community to a large extent. I think my exposure to the Persona community has primarily been through people like Fither, who I watched a lot while I was making the video. Kind of why I reached out to him is because I really liked his content. And then, of course, I think it's Jamesy2Cool, who he made all those videos, very similar animation style to us. he kind of gave me the idea of, oh, I can kind of use this as a way to communicate my ideas of dumb little bits I came up with. So his animation style was obviously a big influence on us. We tried to make it distinct enough that we didn't feel like we were simply ripping him off. Of course, we did voice acting and stuff. So, but other than that, I'm not particularly familiar with the Persona community. I know there's a lot of people who hate the Persona community, specifically the Persona 5 community. Then again, the SMT community seems to hate the Persona community in general.
I was gonna say, and this isn't quite a new thing for me, just because being an artist and, growing up doing stuff, I've seen a lot of the fandoms, and speaking of, I just said I ran awkward Sonic photos. The Sonic fandom is terrible, so I've, seen it all, pretty much at this point, where people argue, they're like, classic Sonic is the true one, no, it's modern Sonic, no, it's adventure Sonic, no, these voice actors are the best, no, these ones suck. So it's like all that, I'm like, I've heard it all. Persona is nothing new to me at this point. This ain't my first rodeo in this.
Yeah.
So I just brush it off. I'm like, once you've been in a fandom for so long and you see stuff, it's just like, oh, same crap as usual.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the thing, is I haven't really ever been involved with any fandoms. I've liked things, but I never really delved into the fandom. So this is kind of a first thing for me. And when I said that stuff, by the way, I don't mean that everybody hates it. I just see that there's a lot of people from various communities who seem to have disdain for the which is understandable. Don't get me wrong. I understand that fans can go overboard of any fandom.
Sonic fandom definitely gets it, other fandoms, not even just video games, but Undertale got it for a long time.
Sure.
And I'm sure there's other ones too, that I haven't fully delved into, but I know other animes get it. I know currently Avatar: The Last Airbender, I'm not even in that one, but I've seen people complaining about stuff going on. I don't even want to know, so I just kind of avoided it, but I see that that's getting a huge thing. It's blowing up for some reason, so I'm kind of afraid to touch that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably a new generation of people from the Netflix series.
Yeah, so it happens everywhere, and people are always gonna be like, these are the best games, don't even pay attention to these ones. And it just, it's sometimes you just have to accept opinions are opinions, and you don't have to force everyone to believe your views.
Yeah, everybody, there's so many subgroups within the Persona fandom itself that it kind of hates itself. There's people who are fans of 3, 4, and then there are the people who are nobody talks about 1 and 2, and obviously we make a little joke about that in our video, but I'm just gonna be straightforward. I haven't played 1, 2, or 2, 2.
Well,
I've only played 3, 3, 4 or 3, 3, 5. Yeah, for sure. I know there's somebody who's working on a fan translation of Persona 1, which I think is pretty cool. I guess I could get them on Vita, or at least I know Persona 1 is on Vita from the PSP re-release, but Persona 2, I'm not quite as familiar on the releases they've had of that since. But anyhow, I feel like I'm getting off topic. So let me ask you, what was your first experience with Persona? Even before, because I know I kind of introduced it to you, but before that, you told me that you kind of knew about Persona.
Okay, this is going to be funny because this is how I treat a lot of things before I actually get invested in them. So I'm not huge into anime. I don't watch anime, really. I didn't even watch Studio Ghibli stuff until recently. In the past year, I was I never had anything against them, I just never really watched them. I never had it on hand, just because my mom was always, she's not into that stuff and she just thinks it's stupid, so I just never really watched mine. So, but in college, I had a friend named Bonnie, and she loved Persona. I know she loved it a lot, and she talked about it. Specifically, this is before Persona 5 came out. She really loved Persona 4, and she had a bunch of merchandise, and I remember her talking about it, but I didn't really understand it. So, like, and I saw pictures, like, online and stuff of the characters, and I just kind of looked at it, and I was like, oh, I don't really know if I'd like that. I don't think that's something I'd be interested in. I'm like, I don't think I'd like this. Little did I know. And I would actually love that game a whole ton. And it wasn't until my first real experience of Persona was when Persona 5 came out, and watching you play it, because I saw you play a bit of Madarame's palace when you were jumping through the paintings. And then later, then I didn't see anything else from that game until I watched you play through Okumura's palace, or Okumura, however you say it. And then I saw the rest of the game from there. So I like missed half the game, or over half the game. But I remember it just really, I don't know, it just like, I found it really interesting. I thought the game looked cool, like the art and everything, the gameplay looked fun, and I did, from little of what I saw of the characters, I thought it was really fun, and I really liked it. And then you told me that I would probably really like Persona 3 and Persona 4. Actually, you sat me down and had me watch the Persona 3 movies. So then I saw those, and I liked them. And I remember I hated the main character in the first movie. I was like, this is not a likable character. I do not care for this guy. This guy sucks. And then by the end, I was like, no, he's
right, yeah.
I was like really upset because I ended up really liking him later. And you know that's good writing when you end up hating someone and then you like them later.
Yeah, I think it's actually a testament. Like, I don't know, honestly, the fandom's opinion on the Persona 3 movies. I actually kind of like them because I think there's a lot of scenes that sometimes fall flat in base Persona 3 that they kind of elevate with the movie, and vice versa. There's other things that fall flat in the movies but I really like the way they're able to actually somewhat characterize Makoto in those films.
Yeah, I mean, for what it was, I think they did a good job. I mean, that's really hard to cram in so much content in, like, movies, and I guess same with the animes, because I know people have a lot of issues with the Persona 5 anime, and rightly so. That animation is really janky. Same with the Persona 4 anime. They're both janky, but I don't know why, but I feel like the Persona 4 anime, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's pacing or something, but I feel like they handled that a bit better, just like storytelling wise. I'm not sure, but then again, I haven't even watched the whole thing of the Persona 5 anime yet. I've only watched up to episode 10. I didn't even watch it when it came out in Japanese.
Yeah, I haven't.
I don't know. I just never got around to watching it. So.
So I showed you Madarame's palace, and then you kind of were interested, and then later you kind of watched me play through the rest of the game, correct?
Yeah, I did. And then you lent me your Vita to play Golden. And so then I did not put down that Vita for like 2 weeks. It took me like, I think probably about that long to play that game. But I was hooked when the story finally started to get rolling. I mean, there was a lot of grinding, but I was okay with that. And I really enjoyed that game. It's like probably one of the best games I've ever played. I really like, and I play a lot of games for story. So even though like the combat wasn't like the greatest and stuff, or the graphics, it's like I could overlook that because I really like games with good storytelling and fun characters. And that just comes from being an artist, learning about how to tell stories and stuff. So it's always intriguing to see what people do. So I really liked it for that aspect. And then I played through Persona 5 by myself from the beginning, and I beat it. And then when Royal came out, I got that and I beat that on my own. And I have Persona 3, and right now I'm at the part where they're trying to get, say, Fuka. So I haven't gotten past that yet.
Yeah.
But that's where I am.
So my background with the Persona series is fairly similar, I guess. So I first I remember because I there's a I follow a group on YouTube called Easy Allies. They do a lot of reviews and stuff, and there's a side podcast that Ben Moore runs, and he's very passionate about lots of video games. JRPGs in particular seem to be one of the things he's the most passionate about. And I remember I was on a bus and I was just listening to a podcast, and this was before Persona 5 came out. I think it was around Tokyo Game Show, maybe like 2016 or something. And he was talking about Persona 5, and I had never heard of the Persona series before at all. Then again, I hadn't played many JRPGs. I don't think I'd played any JRPGs other than like Pokemon. So he kept talking about Persona 5, Persona 5. It looks amazing. It looks great. You guys are not going to believe this game when it comes out. This is going to be the greatest game of all time, blah, 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 blah. And he was really hyping this game up. I'm like, what the heck is this game he's talking about? Like, he was also talking about Final Fantasy 15, but I didn't know. I knew Final Fantasy 15, but I didn't know what Persona 5 was. So I got home and I looked up Persona 5 because I was so curious. I'm like, hey, this looks a lot like Catherine, because I'd watched a playthrough of Catherine, and I really liked that game because I really liked the way they did the characters and the art and everything. And I realized, I'm like, wait, I think these are the same guys who did that game. And so I was like, okay, I thought that was a really intriguing story. I wonder what this is like. And learning that it was more about high school students, and it took place in Japan. It was very interesting to me. And so right after watching the trailer, I was like, well, what was Persona 4 then? So I looked up Persona 4 and I started watching a playthrough of Persona 4. And I probably watched the first, 3-4 hours or so, where you go into the TV. I think I got to the point where they go into the TV and they meet Teddy, and then they leave the TV and Yu awakens to his persona. And after that, I kind of just was like, okay, that looks really cool. Maybe sometime I'll have to get it or something. And I was really interested in it. And I didn't look into anything Persona for like months until I got back from school. And one day, I don't know why the thought came to my mind, but I was like, I remember watching that Persona stuff and that looked really cool. And I'm like, I should try to get Persona 4 Golden on Vita. So I went and I hunted down a Vita at a local GameStop, and then I realized you had to get the stupid memory stick because they have the proprietary hardware. You can't just use like an SD card with a Vita. You have to actually get Sony's memory stick. So I had to hunt one of those down. I had to wait a few days for that to ship, and then I downloaded Persona 4 Golden. And just like you, it was like from the moment I downloaded Persona 4 Golden to when I finished it, I was like super hooked on it, and I was like really into it. Again, I'd never played a JRPG period other than Pokemon, so it was all new to me. So all the tropes, the anime tropes and everything, it was all kind of fresh to me, even though I'm sure half the stuff, especially like the bathhouse trope of like the guy spying on the girls, has been done a million times over.
And every anime has to have the beach episode.
Right.
It never fails. If you're an anime, you have to have a beach episode.
Right. So all the like stuff Golden added that a lot of people kind of are like, yeah, it's just kind of this whatever slice of life stuff that's unnecessary. To me, it was really charming because I hadn't been exposed to all the tropes yet, so it was all new to me. I learned very quickly after that a lot of this stuff is very tropey, but I still enjoyed having all the characters interact with one another, and even if it felt like a waste of time, it was like, oh, this is fun. I like feeling like you're part of this friend group, even though you're sadly sitting outside the Vita and you're just making these contrived decisions that the developers have already made for you and make you feel like you're making.
Yeah, well, I remember you telling me about Persona 4, where you said that playing it, it's like the characters actually kind of feel like teenagers. Like, they don't feel like super fake. Fakey, like, they kind of say stuff like, kids would actually say.
Yeah, like, I think, for instance, I think like, Persona 5
obviously,
does
like,
it
the
well,
immature
too.
humor is definitely a teenager.
Yeah. I think, like, characters like Yosuke do a really good job. Chie, I know a lot of people give Chie's new voice actress flack because she's a little, excited when she does her stuff. But actually, I think they do a really great job of portraying those characters as, fairly realistic. Obviously, there's going to be some things that aren't. But, like, in comparison, especially to Western media and how they portray kids, it's like, yeah, these conversations they have sound like real conversations that kids would be having. Or even the way they refer to some things or think about the world. It's very believable in a vague sense.
Yeah.
So after I finished Golden, I was like, okay, this is like my favorite game now. Like, I loved that game to death. And keep in mind, I had a long period of time for about 10 years or so where I just kind of gave up on video games altogether and I just wasn't into them. And Persona 4 Golden kind of like reignited my love for video games again, and I realized, oh yeah, video games can be good. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know why I went through that phase. I went through this phase where like all my friends wanted to play was like Call of Duty and Halo. And so the only things I played was that, and then Overwatch came out and that kind of helped me get back into, and then Persona, and that kind of really threw me back into what video games were from, how much I enjoyed video games. And I enjoyed them in my youth, and Persona 4 kind of reminded me of that. So it really got me back into games in general. But anyhow, then Persona 5 I was all in on because it was coming out very soon. So I was the weird person who was really lucky who came after the whole Persona 4 train kind of passed and right before the Persona 5 train came in. So I was at like the tail end of the Persona 4 era, and right as Persona 5 was about to come out. That was kind of when I had done all this. And so Persona 5 came out in April. I think I finished Golden in... Well, geez, when did I finish it? I finished it probably around February, maybe. So Persona 5 technically should have been out by then. But anyhow, so it came out in the West, and I downloaded it the day of, and I was so excited. And I remember, playing it, and I probably played the first, I played through the beginning of... why do I want to call him Kanashiro? Kamoshida. I'm an idiot. I played through to the beginning of Kamoshida's palace and met Ryuji and stuff and awakened my persona and got into the first few battles, and I was like, man, this is so much bigger and better than Persona 4. And just the environments, the way that the dungeons weren't randomly generated and that they were all handcrafted. And, the new talking heads and the art styles, updates and the UI, it was just like, it blew my mind playing that game, especially after playing Persona 4. I was just like, whoa, this is like completely different. Social links were now confidants, and simultaneously I was playing Persona 3 at the same time. So my memories of Persona 3 kind of got mixed in with Persona 5. And I finished Persona 3 way before 5. But then I had to go to school about halfway through Persona 5. I got to Futaba's palace, and I think I had gotten to the end and maybe beaten the boss. And then I had to go out to school, and I couldn't bring my PS4 with me because it wasn't my PS4. It was my dad's PS4. So I had to go to school for like, I don't know how many months for spring semester.
Yeah, it's like 3 or 4 months.
3 or 4 months. And then we got back, and then I had to pick it up from there. So I'd forgotten a lot of what was going on. But by that time, Blair was able to watch me play through, and from there, I don't really have to explain it. You guys all know.
Yeah, I remember you like talking about the game when you first came out to college, because I was already out there.
Right.
And so then we just met up, and I remember you talking about the game like, it was like the middle of the night somewhere. We were out walking around campus. I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember where we were going.
I don't know. We were going somewhere, but because it was you, me, and Morgan, and so you were telling us about it, and it just sounded hilarious. I was like, what is this game? We're like, I knew you talked about it before, but and I'm like, oh yeah, I saw like the tiny bit that you played. And normally you and Morgan have a very good job of getting like me to like actually look into things, and I normally never would. I need to be more open about certain games or
Me
just
too.
certain medias in general, because there's sometimes I'm just like, no, this isn't my theme. But yeah, I really love the art style of those games, all of them. Like, I really like the art that those games
Soejima
have.
does.
Yeah, Soejima. Like, I would love to get one of the art books. I know I got you the one art book.
You got me the Persona 5
I need to get this for myself.
Yeah, they're really cool too. You should definitely get some if you can. I think I ended up, when I was at school, I bought one of Soejima's art books. I think his first one, the one with Aigis on the front, and then, of course, you guys got me the Persona 5 one, and then eventually when I got Royal, it came with a mini art book with some of the new updated portraits and personas, and obviously the stuff with Kasumi and Maruki in it. So that was really cool. I would say, yeah, I would think the art style was definitely the first thing. Because, like, again, I saw Catherine before Persona. I watched a playthrough of that, and I really thought it was interesting and funny and cool. And I recognized the same art style, because obviously it's Soejima who does both of them. And so that's what got my attention with Persona 5. I'm like, wait, this is the same art style. I thought it was like, is this the same universe? What is? I couldn't, like, wrap my head around what it was. So I feel like, I don't know if there's many people who came from my perspective who were familiar with Catherine and not Persona. And then you get exposed to Persona, like, months later, and you're like, what the heck is that? And again, I wasn't really that in depth with video games. But because of Easy Allies and Ben and his love for Persona, he's what got me into it, and ever since then I'm like, oh, this has become my favorite series, and I'm really into it. And again, like you, Blair, I'm not really into anime. I didn't really grow up watching much, so it's just one of those things where it's kind of a unique interest to me. Like, not to me like I'm the only one who likes it, but like in the same sense that, like, what it has is very unique in, like, the things that I typically don't really get into that much, you know what I mean? So it's very, very different, but no, I think for us it's become very passionate, especially between the two of us, because, like, we talk about it all the time. And not that we don't like other things. I mean, we have a mutual love for Sonic, and we have a mutual love for Nintendo and a lot of different video games. But
yeah, growing up, we would play a lot of games. Like, I remember, like, the 64, the Sega Genesis, the GameCube, PlayStation. So I've played a lot of games.
Right.
But, like, I mostly watched Western cartoons, not necessarily anime. The most anime thing I've ever watched was obviously when Pokemon was big. I was really into Pokemon, loved Pokemon. And I watched Hamtaro, and that's the extent of my anime experience.
Hey, that's pretty much mine too. I think I may have watched one or two, and I remember I watched this anime. I don't even remember what it was called. I watched it, and I told Morgan about it. It was this really raunchy anime. Like, I didn't intentionally know that that's what it was when I started watching it, but, like, it had this really funny. There was this one specific character that made me laugh really hard, and that was, like, when I realized that anime could. I remember before that, I didn't know anime could actually appeal to me. Like, I thought that it was all about art style, but that they always had dumb stories. Because I always, like, grew up thinking, oh, Dragon Ball Z's dumb. All they do is scream for 10 episodes. Or Naruto's dumb. All they do is sit around and talk about how they're going to fight each other for 10 episodes. And all I knew was, like, all the shonen stuff. Or I thought it was just, like, you know, completely over-sexualized or whatever. And just to the point where it'd be way too embarrassing to even turn on an episode of a show. And that was kind of my impression of anime before that. So then I kind of took a chance with it. I watched it, and I was like, okay, that was actually really funny and actually fairly well written. So I started to realize, okay, you know, they're pretty good at writing too. And then of course the Persona series I like. And again, the writing for Persona is not perfect. Don't get me wrong. I think in a lot of ways, if I knew more about anime, I'd probably find it a lot more generic. Yeah. But because I haven't been exposed to as much, it's still unique to me. And I particularly have a love for the localization because I think the voice actors do a really great job of really portraying those characters.
Not to mention how long those games are and how long you have to those characters, and probably how little context they probably have for what's going on in the game. Like, that'd be really hard.
And I mean, when I say I have a love for the localization, I should clarify. I have a love for the voice acting. Sometimes the localization, the choices they make is sometimes questionable, especially with names. Yeah. It's very bizarre to me.
Yeah, like the pronunciation of names, it's like, why did you do that?
Yeah, exactly. There are certain names that it's like, I'm not even very well versed on how Japanese names should be named, but I can tell you that things like Takamaki are so off base. It's like, Jose is the other one. I know we mentioned it in the video, but that one's not even a Japanese name. It's like, really, Jose? Like, how little faith do you have in Americans? I remember I read something, and I don't know how true this is, but I remember I read somewhere that the localization team, or maybe it was the voice actors, mentioned that Atlas of Japan sent the localization team how they wanted them to pronounce the names and told them that they have to do it that way. And I'm like, that seems really weird that they would do that, though. So I don't know how true that is, but I remember I heard or read that somewhere.
Oh wait, well, watching the Persona 5 dub the other day, I heard some characters slipping because they kept saying, like, you know, they went Sakamoto for Ryuji, and then later on someone went, Sakamoto, and I'm like, oh, they slipped.
Yeah, they slipped when they said it right. They do that in the game a few times too. I know there have been a few times. Some of those like the ways they pronounce those names, I'm like, how did they even come up with these? Like, especially ones like it's funny to me, like, you can get something so wrong like Takamaki, but then you can get Kobayakawa and you don't screw that one up royally. I can't. It's weird because, like, some of them are fine and then some of them are just so off. It's like
future video idea.
Right? Yeah, and
where everyone will just, like, we won't bring it up. It'll just be everyone says every name wrong, like a horrible mispronunciation.
Yeah. The names just like progressively get worse and worse, like the pronunciations. But like, what was I gonna say? It's very bizarre to me that that's a thing, but it gets to a point where you hear the name so many times when you're playing that you even start to say it, even though you know it's wrong.
Like how I slipped up in the beginning when I said Okumura.
Yeah, and I tried to, like, avoid that in my video. I'm sure I got some stuff wrong though, but, like, yeah, Okumura is it rolls off the tongue in a way that almost makes it sound better than Okumura, and so it's just like. It's just funny how those things worm their way in, and I mean, we just had the P5A dub come out, I think literally like yesterday or today, so I'll be curious to see that if I even watch it, but now that we've kind of talked about, oh man, we're half an hour in and we only discussed like our experience. I kind of wanted to talk about like our experience with Persona 5 Royal, and what I can't get this out. I'm sorry, I stutter a lot. So I want to talk about our experience with Persona 5 Royal, what we thought about it, and I guess in some ways a mini review of some of the new things.
Because we totally did not do that in our last video.
It's funny because
game and poke fun at it.
Well, the entire point of, and if you guys don't know what we're talking about, we're referring to our first video, which currently only has about 2,300 views, which is good for us. I've never had this many views on anything. Well, I have, but old stuff, and I was like over a decade ago that we put up those old videos. Anyhow, it's Persona 5, a summary and parody. Persona 5 Royal, a summary and parody. And we basically discussed the third semester, some of the new changes, and then we added in, like, I think it's something like 30 to 40 minutes of just animated bits of dumb things that we wrote. So it's like we have these little bits that are interspersed between my narration of the game, and I kind of describe what happens in the third semester.
Contrast. My favorite contrast of that is where they're all remembering like the real reality, and then it's like that huge bit and it ends, and then you're just like, and that's how they all remembered.
Well, the thing was, so okay, for context for people who watch this video, that video is such a mess that it's funny to think that video took like 3 months to make. More. It took more.
We made this video when we beat the game in April. Like, this idea came, and we started working on it like the end of April, beginning of May.
Yeah.
Like, and we were playing Royal at the exact same time.
Yeah, end of April, beginning of May. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah. So, yeah, we were both playing Royal around the same time. Like, we were barely, like, we'd be switching of who was ahead of each other, but we were, like, at the same palace at the same time. So, we were always, like, right behind each other, and we'd talk about where we were, and we'd try not to spoil anything for each other while we were playing. It was pretty fun having, like, someone to play with at the same time. Like, someone who wasn't already beaten the game. Like, we could go at our own pace together.
Right. And, I mean, I would say we're pretty easy to please, honestly. So, like, our experience with Persona 5 Royal, even though it was a fully priced re-release of the base game, I fully understand anybody who thinks that it's not worth it and they wouldn't even bother, which is part of the reason I made that video. Is like, if somebody wants to get a quick understanding of kind of what goes down in the third semester specifically, then that video is for you. There's a lot of people who are probably like, who in the world would even want to watch a summary? But believe me, I have done that with other things before, and sometimes it's helpful, and I wanted to just make it a little more fun. So when we did that video, I think originally we wanted to just do the parody part, but then I realized, well, we kind of need something to... I kind of want to make it a review, and so we just did this weird hybrid, which I don't know if I regret in retrospect or not, because... there's some people who said the review was good and other people who just thought the bits were good. So we are releasing a part with just the bits if it's not up on the channel already. But the way we wrote that was so funny because we just kind of sat down together and we're like, okay, what are all the really funny parts of Persona 5 Royal that we can
how should
make
we
fun of?
I just remember, like, we were trying to walk through the third semester again after we beat the game, just with each other. It's like, okay, well, this happened here and this happened there, and we're talking about, it's like, okay, well, Akechi comes to you, you know, after the fake reality is a thing, and we're like, okay, well, he needs to come over and he needs to tell Joker, and they have to discuss things, and we're like, and I was like, oh wait, you know how like they talk in the laundromat, like right by the bathhouse? We should actually have them talking in the bathhouse.
Right, because we were talking about how that new part with him in the bathhouse, and like, I don't know where the Speedo thing came from. Somehow that got brought up, and we were like, what would it say on the back of their Speedos? And you were like, and I couldn't think of anything, and you were the one who came up with the Detective Prince and Attic Trash.
Well, that's because, okay, you have to thank the fandom for Attic Trash, because there's actually, there's this, person on Twitter who, like, he just posts, like, edited images, and it's just, like, Joker saying stupid stuff, and his name is Attic Trash, so that's where I got it.
Oh, okay.
It's a funny name.
Yeah,
Like, yells at him when he's fighting him. He was like, you're just some criminal trash living in an attic. So I just thought it was funny.
Yeah, full disclosure, there are definitely some jokes from there that are like obviously parodies of like other things. Like The Yusuke eating the Sayori joke is not completely
SpongeBob.
ours. It was based on the SpongeBob joke where Squidward has to eat his I don't know if it's Bolden Brash or what he eats.
No, he's selling paintings like he quits the Krusty Krab, and then he's like, I could be like a football player,
Right.
kid, face or whatever, and like his paintings and SpongeBob is like, oh good, and like good for you, and then like it just cuts to like months later, and he's like a hobo on the street, and SpongeBob is like, what about your painting? And he's like, no,
That's
I
right.
buy them, so I had to eat them, and I'm like, that just kind of sounds like Yusuke.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's the starving artist, so we gotta give credit where credit's due. There's also, I know there's at least one or two other jokes that are like little references to things.
Oh,
I know.
When Joker and Akechi are fighting in Mementos, the 8 rank bit, where they're just like, it's over, Crow, I have the high ground. We just ripped that from
Oh, that's just the Star Wars
episode
thing.
3 of
Yeah.
Star Wars with
Yeah.
Anakin.
And then I think there's also a reference for I don't know if anybody here even knows the Allies. Probably not. I highly recommend checking them out. One of the guys, Kyle Bossman, had a series called Box Peak. And there's a little reference to it in the part where they're in the locker room, and Akechi makes that "What if we were naked?" joke when they walk in. It's a little reference to one of the episodes from Box Peak. But I just thought that joke struck me as so funny in his version that I was like, oh, I gotta make a joke about that since they're basically naked anyhow, which makes it even funnier. Anyhow,
Towels on.
what's that? Oh yeah, they have their towels on. Anyhow, we're not even talking about Persona 5 Royal. We're just talking about our video at this point. But a lot of the jokes obviously came from, just the thing. Between you, me, Burning Skylark, and Okaboji, we did all the voices for better or for worse.
Like, none of us have had any voice training.
Oh yeah, if it wasn't evident to you guys, yeah, no, we've never done anything.
And I'm totally aware my mic was terrible, because when I was doing that audio, I was just like, oh, this is like the worst thing I'm hearing right now. And I'm like, I just know someone's going to call me out on this.
Which
like,
is fine.
What is with this horrible, also like Shido's voice? They're like, who did they get for Shido? This voice sucked. It doesn't even sound like the character.
Okay, wait, we have to explain that though. So when we were playing Persona 5, base Persona 5 for the first time, you were watching me, and we were going through Shido's palace. Spoilers, by the way. Spoilers. If you're listening to this, spoilers. And when you're going through Shido's palace, you can vaguely, or you can kind of hear this thing in the background. There's like a speaker or something that's playing in the background, and you hear Shido's voice over the intercom. And he's, I guess, speaking to the masses who are on his ship.
He's like basically making like a campaign speech, kind of like you just hear it in the background.
Right, exactly. And
Like
he would say something reminiscent of, "Cast your vote for me, Masayoshi Shido," blah blah blah. And for some reason, while we were sitting there, Blur was just like, "Vote for me, Shido!" And for some reason, like, she kept saying that, and it was like every time we'd run into Shido, she would say that, and we would just laugh about it. And so, for some reason after that, when we were planning this video, we were like, Blair, you have to voice Shido. Nobody's gonna understand why we have you as Shido.
It's an inside joke between us, so it's like funny to us.
So, I'm sure other people found it funny because it was just kind of like a what the
really
heck
crappy
type
account.
of moment. Yeah. So, that's the brief story behind that. Although I think most of the jokes were just dumb little things we came up with along the way. And I was telling Blur earlier, it was like when we were recording this, it took so long. So we started this back in like late April, we were writing it. I think by May, I had a script written and I started the recording process. And so I don't really have anywhere to record here. So I went out to my car and I drove it to like a parking lot. And I was sitting there doing all these dumb voices of all these characters. And originally, I have like 20 takes of these lines. And so, again, I don't know the process. I don't know what is proper etiquette for recording anything. So I was just kind of recording on my microphone that I had. And I was just belting out these lines in the middle of some random parking lot, and there were like people walking by, and I'd like look out the window and I'm like hunched over in the back of the car. It's the middle of the summer and it's like blazing hot and I had to turn off the air, so I'm sitting there like sweating through everything I'm wearing doing these character lines. I was like so exhausted and probably completely dehydrated. Yeah, it's all for the art of it. I'm sure Yusuke would do the same thing. And I was like dying, and I was like doing these lines. I'm like, oh no, I still have all of Yusuke's lines to do, or I have all of Maruki's lines I gotta go through. And you would just have to go through them one at a time and do multiple inflections. I recorded way too many takes of lines. Like sometimes it would be like 15 to 20 takes of one line because I just wanted to get the right inflection, or sometimes a line wouldn't sound right. And also I'm well aware that my voices are not particularly reflective of the actual voice actors. So I was telling Blair also that like the way I did these voices was, and I'm sure anybody could tell you this isn't really news, but the way I did it was, or the way I thought about it is, if you want to do a character, you don't necessarily have to be able to do the character's voice accurately, as long as you can capture like the cadence in which they speak, or like if you can basically recreate an approximation of the character in your head, then you can basically sell the character to a certain extent. It's never going to sound 100% like them unless you can just do a really good impression.
Well, also, I think part of it was probably some of the lines, because I helped you with the script, but you kind of like finalized and edited it all, because you did like the whole narration and everything, and kind of wrote like the specific dialogue. So I think you kind of got the basics of the characters pretty well, like how Yusuke talks.
Sure.
And a lot of that really helps sell it too, because you can't just have like them say whatever they want, because then it doesn't really feel like the character anymore.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's so funny because then you can like take a line, but then you can take a character like Joker and you can just amp them up to the umpteenth degree, and it's so far off what his character actually is, but because he's like a no-name, character, you can kind of do whatever you want with him. And so we just kind of made Joker this jerk.
He's just like this huge jerk in the end.
Like, there should be no reason our interpretation of Joker, anybody should be hanging out with that guy. Like, they should all hate his guts. But because he's the protagonist, everybody's just like...
They just all love him and overlook all his flaws.
Right, exactly. Even when he's saying those horrible things to him, or horrible things about them when he's giving his final, like, pep talk.
Speech. I think that was another idea I brought up. I'm like, we should have, like, when they're because we were talking about the differences of reality and how, like, we could make a joke about how they want to go back to the really, sadness of like having to deal with all their traumas and hardships, and like we should make like this really dumb speech where Joker's like commenting on that, on like how much of a better decision like Maruki's reality is.
Right.
Like it's a much better deal.
Yeah, exactly. It's very fun. Because I think, again, this was supposed to be us discussing Persona 5 Royal, and now we're just discussing our video, but Persona 5 Royal has a really interesting conflict with, the characters having to either go for the reality that they've created through all the work that they put in throughout the game, at least for themselves. They put all this effort into defeating all these bad guys, exposing them, changing what they could through
And
their
then
own
Maruki
efforts.
comes and he's just like, you know what? None of this really matters. So I'm just gonna make everything perfect for you. And I was like, well, what was the point of everything we did?
Right, exactly. But I do think it's an interesting conflict. I think in some ways it's the most interesting of
Yeah,
at least
I have
Persona
to say,
5.
the third semester is probably still one of my favorite parts of like the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
I just really like the conflict of the characters. Maruki's a really well-written villain, I think, or he's not even really a villain, just antagonist.
Right.
It's just kind of like the ideals. It's just the differencing of ideals, and I kind of like that almost more than just there being a big bad guy at the end, like Shido.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a boring villain. It's just evil, you know, typical, I'm an evil politician.
Right.
And there's nothing beyond that.
And I know a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I'm not here to argue with people. In fact, I'm open to hearing people's perspective on this. I would even say Akechi, there's a point in the game where Akechi just is like, okay, we get it. You're evil. You know, there's not really much to him at that point. Once he's kind of exposed.
Once you figure it out yourself, I mean, we figured it out really quickly.
Oh yeah, I'm
We're
sure
like,
everybody did. But the thing was like, and I'm sure this is a concern a lot of people had with base Persona 5. When I was first playing, I was like, okay, there is absolutely no way Atlus will be so stupid as to make Akechi the villain. They are obviously setting him up as a red herring. He is not the villain. They want you to think he is. And then at the last second, they're going to flip it around on you. And you're going to find out it was like Ryuji the entire time. Which I really want them to do in a game.
Because they were going to do that in like Persona 4.
I think Persona 4, yeah, there's rumors about like what they were going to do with that. I don't want to get into that just in case nobody's played it. But, sorry, if you wanted to, you can.
Oh no, it's okay. I just heard that like they had a bunch of different ideas going around. I don't know how accurate any of it is, but I like just reading. But there was the one, like, I heard it was like, oh, I'm probably completely wrong on this, but I was reading something that they changed the villain near end of production. Like, it was all built up to be someone else, but then they had like, what is it called? The focus group be like, no, we don't like that. That's kind of too creepy. And they're like, oh, okay, well, we'll change it. But I think it still worked out in the end, I think, because it made that character kind of interesting, but also it was kind of sad, because it's like, oh, I kind of like them the other way.
Me too, yeah. But going back to Akechi, it was one of those things where it's like his character was I mean, it's not that he's not a... I guess it is that he's not a complex character, but like he's an intriguing character.
Yeah,
he has a sense of... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I guess you could argue that he's deep, but I mean, it's kind of like, I will say, like, I've seen these characters before. They're the antagonists with their tragic background.
And ooh, they're crazy on top of everything else.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
And then we're saying this, we love Akechi. Akechi's like one of our favorite characters.
Yeah, Burning Skylark hates Akechi with a burning passion.
she actually absolutely despises it. So it's not
she
like him
would
at
be
all.
she literally like in disgust anytime I share anything with her that's Akechi. But I don't know. We had this very weird version of Akechi that we created for our video, who is somewhat accurate, I would say, but in other ways
he's... the third semester, at least when he's in battle, is kind of just the energy we got, because I'm sorry, but that was like one of my favorite things.
Yes.
Just those three, Joker, Akechi, and Sumire all together. That was like I was like, oh man, the dream team right here. I just thought it was such a funny contrast.
Yes.
I almost, in a weird way, I almost wish you just went through the whole palace with those three as your team, because that would have been hilarious.
Well, I would say Akechi actually becomes a much more complex character once you get to the third semester.
Yeah,
because
a lot opens up afterwards. Because once the initial story's over, then all of a sudden he's just like, what do I have left?
Right.
It gives him a new kind of conflict.
Yeah, exactly. It's not... I want to expose the Phantom Thieves, blah, 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 and that I secretly am the one behind everything, and get revenge on Shido. And he automatically becomes, you know, he's at this weird point where he's like, well, what do I have to live for? But he still has these weird tendencies, like he's still falling back on his detective tendencies in the third semester, and you know, he wants to team up with Joker and the team, and you still don't quite know what his true motive is. You know, is he really in it for this? But then, you know, he kind of becomes honest with you, and so I think that the relationship you share with Akechi becomes a lot more
and I do feel like it's kind of neat. It's like he kind of has nothing really left to really hide from them.
Right, exactly.
Personality-wise, it's like they already know my motives, my backgrounds. I straight up told them, and I feel like he doesn't necessarily like them, obviously, because there's no way Haru and Futaba would ever probably want to get close to him.
No,
I mean, I wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's like, he is the character. I even found it surprising in some ways that they decided to team up with him, because they share values. Because you got to think of what he's done to these people. I mean, he's literally killed, like, how many of their parents? And yet they're just kind of willing to let bygones be bygones.
Well, I did see I don't know if it was like the director or one of the writers from Atlas they talked about. They specifically did not have Futaba or Haru interact with Akechi in the third semester very much, more than what they had to, because they said they're still, you know, they're dealing with feelings of their own, that they don't really forgive him or trust him.
Well, which gives context to the line that they give Haru specifically about killing Akechi if he betrays them. It's like, yeah, actually, that makes sense. She deserves... If anybody deserves to kill him, it's Haru.
Yeah, that's true. I love Akechi as a character. Definitely, I'm not one of those people who condone his actions whatsoever. If it was up to me,
oh yeah, absolutely,
he'd be rotting in prison somewhere.
Yeah, but that doesn't take away from my love for just his character and his snarkiness, which is funny because usually there's very few characters that can pull that off, and I still like them.
Normally, I can't stand them, and this goes into another Japanese game. Like, we don't play a lot of these things, or anime. Danganronpa.
Yeah, Danganronpa for sure.
It's
funny because
I won't spoil anything for that game, but if you play V3, on all these games, that trilogy, there's always one character who's kind of like the antagonist, who's kind of always there. That character, near the end of the game, I was like, okay, you were kind of funny before, but fourth trial, I hate your guts, and nothing can redeem you, and I don't like you.
Yeah, the only one I think that I would say Tagami from Danganronpa 1.
Oh yeah, I like him a lot.
He's almost like a much more innocent version of Akechi, but he's also, I would say he's like the later version of Akechi when he's not hiding anything anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I mean he's just constantly belittling you when you talk to him. He's always there. Dude, like he's always telling, like, pushing you down. He's like making you feel crap about yourself. Yeah. He never has anything nice to say until like the end of the game, sort of. But even then, it's like barely.
Right. So that being said, we've talked a little bit about Akechi, and we talked a little bit about Maruki. I want to ask you, what are your thoughts on Kasumi as a character?
I liked her quite a bit. I did kind of have, you mentioned that in the previous video, that she didn't really have a lot of interactions besides Joker. I would have liked to see her integrated into the group better. I mean, they kind of did it very little in the trip to Hawaii, where they're just like, oh yeah, you guys are friends, and then they talk about it afterwards, and they kind of like, you know, feel bad for her position about almost losing her honor status, but it doesn't really go much beyond that until the third semester, so I kind of wish they would have built that up more. And I know she's kind of like the really good character. I know some people are like, well, that's not very deep, but I don't know, I liked her a lot. I thought she was like a harmless addition, and I fall into the minority in this, I think. Might get a lot of people mad. But I mean, I'm not here to say, if you like this character, you're wrong. I just didn't really like this character. I did not like Marie in Persona 4. I did her entire social link, and I was like, well, maybe I'll like her at the end. Maybe I'll like her at the end. And I was like, no, I still don't like her.
I think you might actually be in the majority there. I think a lot of people don't like Marie. I don't know how many people I've even heard talk about Marie, period. She's so, I don't know, forgettable.
I don't know, and
she's just
like,
unlikable.
I was afraid that Kasumi was gonna fall into that. I was like, is she just gonna be there to be there? And thankfully, she had a much bigger role. Eventually, and
right.
I really, I like her persona a lot, and
she might have one of my favorite personas of everybody. Hers is just really cool. I like the Cinderella inspiration and everything, especially when it turns evil when you're fighting her.
Oh, that was like the coolest part.
I loved that.
That was like one of my favorite parts. I was like, oh, you're fighting the persona itself. That's awesome.
That was very cool. And how I mean, there's all these obviously unspoken things about personas, like all the rules and stuff. And I'm sure if you play SMT, you know, I feel like if you come from SMT, you're much more passionate about the actual, like, personas and demons and stuff. But if you come from Persona, you don't really think that much about the demons and personas. You think more about just the characters.
You're just like, oh, it's just the personas and shadows. They're just ugly Pokemon.
And I'm not saying that's everybody. I just think that the SMT community, that from what I've seen, is much more passionate about the demons themselves. And in some ways, I would say the personas. Because, like, I find the personas cool, but, like, I don't even remember what their names are after their second evolution, let alone their third awakening when you get them. Even though I've seen some of them, and some of them are cool, and some of them are kind of interesting designs. I think I like all the first original versions of everybody's personas the best. Then again, it's probably just because I can remember the names of the personas. But I really like Cendrillon. I think she's awesome.
Yeah, and you know, I got everyone's third awakening except for Futaba. I got everyone except for Futaba because I made, when I was playing Royal, I made Akechi, Maruki, and Kasumi my top priority. So if there was, and everyone else was kind of secondary. I was like, because I already played base Persona 5, so I already knew their social links, and I really wanted to get the third semester. So I was like, okay, these guys are a priority. If they want to hang out, I'm hanging out with them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because, like, I'm terrible with managing my time in Persona. Genuinely, I am. To the point where I think I only got, like, 1 or 2, maybe 3 social links maxed out. It was really sad. I think I did a better job than my first playthrough Persona. I got a lot of people close, and then I think I may have gone for too many people to try to get them high, that I ended up not getting anybody maxed out. So I didn't even get Kasumi maxed. I wanted to, like, because I wanted to date Kasumi, but I couldn't. So I was like, I'll just settle for On, I guess. I didn't date her the first time, so I'll just go for On, because she's the only other one that I had maxed out.
Yeah, you said you ended up liking On a lot more in your second playthrough.
Weirdly enough, because, like, that's the thing is, playing through Persona 5 again, even though, like, I know there was some new added stuff for On, most of it was just the same stuff. So, like, I ended up, I think, just paying attention more to the characters that kind of, like, because the first time I played Persona 5, I didn't think much of On. I was just kind of like, whatever. And all the characters that I, like, really liked the first time kind of fell into the background this time for me because I was focusing on all the other characters I didn't last time. And so I grew a new appreciation for a lot of different characters. I definitely grew an appreciation for both Ryuji and On. Not that I didn't like Ryuji the first time, I did. And I really liked Makoto and Haru the first time I played through, but I didn't really think much about them the second time. Not because I don't like them, but just because I guess I wasn't as focused on them. And of course, Kasumi and Akechi. I only loved Akechi more after we got to the third semester. I freaked out when he walked in the door and, when he comes out and he takes your place, because I had seen the trailers, but I had forgotten everything we had seen from Persona 5 Royal, so the fact
and you
that
got to the
Akechi
point where
was
you didn't
back,
want to watch any more of the trailers. You're like,
Right.
they're showing way
they were showing
too much.
way too much, yeah. So
And
I
was
just
like,
stopped
I mean,
watching.
half the time, sometimes I don't care if I get spoilers, because I don't know, I'm just that kind of person. So if I run
Mhm.
across a spoiler, I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, sometimes I'll get upset. It depends how big the spoiler is. But
Right.
I'll watch the trailers. And I watched the trailer, and I was like, oh, yeah, don't watch this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, is you never know what you're gonna get, especially with Atlas making trailers, man. Some of their trailers are just, there's too much in them. They need to know when to pull back. Then again, that's an issue with a lot of companies, not just Atlas. But overall, I mean, I really liked Kasumi. I sometimes I wish I got to do a little more with her, because they really speed you through those next 5 ranks because they hold them back for so long.
I am glad that they had events outside her social link, though, too. Where, like, you just run into her and talk to her. So they kind of tried to fit her into the plot better, which I do appreciate, that they didn't just, like, throw her in and then make her this big thing at the end, like they do with Murray.
Yeah. Exactly. I would say overall I like Kasumi. I wish we got to see a little more of her, like you said, interacting with the group. The twist with her and Sumire is interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily anything that was completely necessary. It did make her interesting near the end, when you find out that she's actually Sumire, but it's also kind of like, okay, all right.
You do feel bad for her.
Yeah, no, you do. I mean, don't get me wrong. It makes her a little more empathetic. But I do think the most interesting new addition is Maruki for sure, in my opinion.
Oh, definitely.
Everything they do with him is really interesting, from when you first start talking to him to he's like taking interest in you and you're like, what is this guy's deal? And when you first go to that palace, for some reason, I don't know how it didn't, because I'm sure with everybody else it clicked. You and Okuboji figured it out really quick. But when we went to that first palace, I'm like, this must be Akechi's palace. Even though it made no sense as to why his palace would be in this area. Though I could only think of, like, this has got to be Akechi's palace. This has got to be Akechi's palace. And I was like, because I got the soundtrack with the new version of
the special edition
with the Phantom Thieves edition. It came with a 10-song soundtrack. And I was looking at the titles because I was listening to the soundtrack, and the one song title was Gentle Madman. And to me, I did not think Maruki. I instantly thought of Akechi, because I'm like, okay, he has a very gentle demeanor on the outside, but you know he's a complete madman. And I knew it was the music from the palace because I recognized it. And so I was like, that's Akechi's palace. Like, I thought for sure it was. But I was still confused because I'm like, none of this fits Akechi. And why is his palace here? And somebody pointed this out, and I thought this was really interesting. Apparently in base Persona 5, or even maybe it might even be in Royal, but I don't remember, Morgana makes mention. So this is a not a loophole. What do you call it? When you have something that goes against the canon, it's like a plot hole. There's a plot hole where Morgana mentions that if you have a persona, you can't have a palace. And I'm like,
well, no, they talk about that specifically when they go to meet Lavenza in the nurse's office.
Oh, do they?
Because Morgana's like, wait, it shouldn't be possible for a persona user to have a palace. You can't have
both.
both.
That's right.
And
that's
she
right.
talked about it's because of his special,
Control.
his persona's ability, and not to mention he took control of
reality. So I'm sure he could change
so
anything.
So he was able to have both.
Yeah.
Which is awfully convenient.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I guess they must have acknowledged it. I'm glad they did, because I read that.
I'm kind of glad they did, because when I saw that, I was like, they better answer this, otherwise it's gonna be a huge plot hole.
Yeah. So when I found out it was Maruki, because you mentioned you thought it was Maruki, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes way more sense.
Yeah, I figured it out. I pretty much guessed it, like, before it was confirmed. When, pampered woman and laid back man.
Yeah.
Were saying it, and they said a lab, and so obviously my mind went to, oh, research, and then the only name they really brought up was when, Kasumi's talked about Dr. Maruki, and I was like, oh, okay, well that pretty much answers it. I'm like, that has to be him. I don't remember them really mentioning anyone else.
Right.
So...
It should have been obvious.
Like,
him and Kasumi were the only new additions. It should have been blatantly obvious to me. But I think I was just trying not to think too hard about...
I remember when they announced Maruki, I did not think about him, like, twice. I know everyone else was, like, freaking out because they were just like, oh, he's hot.
Right.
But, you know, me, I'm just like, he's a cartoon character, I don't care. But, it was just, I was just like, oh, he's just an extra social link. And I didn't think anything beyond that.
Right.
Until, my one friend told me, she's like, you gotta max out. It's like, I don't want to give spoilers, but you want to max out, like, all the new confidants, social links, and Akechi. And I was like, oh, okay. Right. I'll do that, because they're like, otherwise, you know, you're locked out at the third semester entirely.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, for most people, the majority of the reason they got the game.
Right. Well, Maruki comes off as a really likable character. Obviously, he's there because of all the stuff going down at the school, and he's just nice to... It's nice to have an adult in the game that you can kind of trust.
Yeah.
And there are other adults really that you can. Obviously, you have confidants with plenty of adults.
Like, Sojiro, like, he warms up to you, like, gradually.
Right. Maruki is, like, one of the only ones who's, like, outwardly friendly towards you and just wants to help you.
Kind of, like, on your side the whole time.
Right. Which is why when you find him in the palace, it's kind of like, whoa, Maruki, what are you doing? Even though he has good intentions. But he becomes very obsessed, you know, with his idea of reality and wanting to be a savior, and he's literally got a god complex.
Yeah, he definitely gets caught up in that. And it's like, obviously, like, he probably wants the best for everyone, but he doesn't know everyone. Like, obviously he can, like, with his power, he can kind of tap into people, but I don't think he necessarily actually knows what they want. Or maybe he knows what they want, he doesn't know what they need.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And again, I think he doesn't realize what he's throwing away, you know.
I think he's probably thinking about everything that happened to him and his girlfriend, and he's just like, well, I need to help everyone like her. Right. And I think he gets just so caught up in that.
I do like learning about his past.
He doesn't realize people can grow past their traumas. Like, obviously, there's some things you'll never fully get over. Like, I don't think ever at any point, at least realistically, like, I don't think Futaba would probably ever fully get over being somewhat of a shut-in. Even with her change of heart. I mean, maybe with the change of heart, but, like, realistically, that'd be really hard, and it'd be really hard to trust and open up to people after how she's been treated in the past, like, as a kid growing up.
Sure.
If you do her social link, her uncle was, like, making her sleep on the floor and not letting her take baths and stuff. Like, straight up, like, full-on abuse. Right. Like, it'd be really hard to end up opening up to people later on. Like, you'd have a lot of, like, social, like, aversion, I would think. Like, that might just be something that you just have to deal with for the rest of your life. There's just some things that, like, you know, like, eventually you learn how to cope in your own ways, but everyone is different, so not everyone's gonna meet, like, this perfect standard of, like, all of a sudden, oh, I can just interact with everyone right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I do like the way that they approach it, though, because obviously there is some conflict there, and I think it was probably the best addition that Atlus has made to any of the Persona games, like, in terms of, like, an expansion or DLC or whatever you want to refer to it as.
I think so, too. I think, and from what I've seen, a majority of people really liked the addition of the third semester. I know some people, and I kind of also fall into this category, said it was a bit too short.
Mm-hmm.
But for what it was really, really well written, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
done very smart.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate. It's definitely a step up for what they did for Golden, which was just the ski trip, but you had to do that all in one day.
Yeah, and I didn't even get to do my playthrough. I did the ski trip, I think, but I didn't get to do any of the final boss stuff. So, because I think it was because I never did anything with Marie, and I never want to hang out with her. So, I don't know. I could be wrong on that. I honestly haven't done that much research.
Well, it's okay, because I didn't do Adachi's social link. I did it once, and then I never did it again, so I got locked out of a lot of interesting outcomes because of that.
So back to Persona 5 Royal. I mean, we have all the story updates, obviously. We have the really cool ending, but we also have new, like, additions to boss fights.
I really like that. Oh my gosh, I was terrible. So, my first playthrough, base Persona 5, Madarame's boss, I died! Like, I'm not kidding, 15 times!
Yeah, I remember one of my buddies had a hard time with it.
Until finally, I just got really lucky. I found, like, some way of how to do it. I forget what my strategy was, but I found a strategy that worked for me, and then I was finally able to beat it, but I was, like, really frustrated. So when I was like, I do not want to do him again. I don't want to do him again. And then the next time I beat him my first try, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad they changed this. And then you get the Okamura's.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, that was horrible.
Yeah, I remember. So when you were talking about Madarame, are you talking about the updated version of him? The new?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The updated version is way easier.
Yeah. Okumura, whatever you want to call him. His boss battle, we gotta mention this at least.
Oh yeah,
it's frustrating. I'll say that. I won't say it's necessarily impossible, because once you figure out the trick of it, which is essentially you've just gotta have personas with like the right moves, and you gotta hit the right weaknesses.
Really, baton pass. You need to
baton pass for sure, because you got to do so much damage before those things start blowing up on their own.
And you have to take them all out around the same time.
Because that's the real struggle, is you need to take them out at a certain point. And so if you can't do enough damage to them, then you're not going to be able to really get past a certain point in the battle. So you've got to use a lot of buffs and debuffs, and you've got to have the right personas
too. Because sometimes you just have some characters where they can't target a weakness. So if you have the right items, that helps a lot too.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Even if it just knocks them down.
Which, this is going to sound sad, but I never used items to attack stuff until I got to the boss. Because I just would cheese my way through the old-fashioned way, which is like, oh, I guess this will probably do a lot of damage. It says it'll do colossal damage. I'll do that. Which, funny enough, I think I say this in the video, but after a while I was like, I'm just going to summon this persona that's way higher level than me. And because I had, like, the special edition, I could download Thanatos, and there wasn't any restriction, I guess, on, like, what level you have to be to summon the persona, as long as you have it in your compendium.
Yeah, they were, like, level 90 something.
Yeah, and so I was like, I'll just summon this, and I'll just do that to destroy these stupid... Because it was once you got to, like... I think it was the green guys were harder, but there's also the one before that was really annoying, like the blue guys. And I remember them being annoying too.
I could, my few attempts of that, I could get through the first few waves really fast, and then I just hit the green guys, and I'm like, I just gotta take out the stupid green guys. I literally got to the point where I was like the last bit of the boss fight. Like I was right about to destroy the cognitive Haru, or she was about to blow up on literally the next turn. And I had 15 seconds left. I'm like, I could do it if she just blows up in these next 15 seconds, and then I can attack him all the way. And it was like, literally about to be my turn, so I could beat it. And the time ran out, and I was like, no!
Yeah, I remember that. I think I watched you do that, actually.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I remember that. That boss is something else. I mean, it's not, again, there's much harder bosses in the grand SMT. That boss is probably at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to SMT bosses. But in Persona,
I haven't played any SMT games. I probably should, because
I really haven't either. I've been playing through SMT4, but aside from that,
you and I are like new to the fandom. Me more than you, because I mostly watched you play like Persona 5. Like, I didn't play Golden, because Golden was the first Persona game I played by myself. And that was in April of 2019, so only a year ago. And then in the summer, I played base Persona 5 with Okaboji, and then I played Royal, and then right now I'm playing 3.
Yeah. But other bosses were way, like, to me, it may have just been a second playthrough, but it felt way easier to me. Overall, I don't think I struggled with any of the other bosses after, other than Okumura. That was the only one. And I was like, this feels way easier. Because my first P5 playthrough, I don't know why, but I struggled so much with Shido. And I
remember that. I fell asleep.
I got so... yeah, exactly. You were watching. It was like... I beat him at like 3 in the morning after fighting him forever. You were like,
wake up, I beat him.
And when you lose a battle in Persona, you're like, crap, I just lost 30 minutes of time. I gotta go through all that again. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's because I knew the strategies, or maybe it was easier. I don't know what the deal was, but I did really enjoy some of the additions. The Kamoshida stuff with the volleyball kids is creepy, and also like there's certain parts of it that are kind of funny, like when he's like, get out here, Mishima, blah blah blah, and he's like yelling at Mishima and commanding him to do stuff.
I know, it's like, oh my gosh.
Madarame, of course, had all the new stuff. I can't remember
I think it's kind of cool that it like added into what these characters are like, into like, you know, like the will seeds. It kind of tells them, like, because they're all based on the 7 deadly sins, so it goes into that too. But also, like, Madarame, like, he makes copies of himself, but they, you know, they're terrible. They're not very good copies, so it kind of adds, like, you know, he just plagiarizes other people's work that is not even really a real artist deep down.
That makes sense. I never thought about that, but yeah, I guess you're right. Then there's Kaneshiro, who I don't remember what the new part of his boss battle was. He felt pretty much the same to me. I don't know if you remember.
He did feel pretty much the same, because he was still in the giant Piggytron. The robot. I'm trying to remember what was different about it. I know
Kaneshiro still has like my favorite villain design, because he's so different. He looks like he's like from Dragon Ball or something. Because all the other characters just kind of look normal. He's like the Ryoma of Danganronpa. He
talks like a punk in it too. Like all this, it's like, what happened?
Yeah. So I think he's one of those villains that's like, he's very flat and very just, I'm evil and I want money, but like his delivery of a lot of his lines cracks me up. And I just like his design. Who's after that? Is it Futaba? Yeah, I guess it is.
I really like hers just because like her whole palace just feels kind of like a callback to Persona 4. Because it's like, oh, you're helping your friend.
Yes.
Like, and she kind of like accepts herself immediately. Like, it's kind of funny because her shadow actually reaches out to her directly, trying to get her to like, and it's not like malicious, kind of like some of the other ones where they kind of want them to like deny them.
Right.
Like, yeah, I want you to reject me so then I can go crazy and I guess be my own self or whatever. But hers kind of like reaches out to her and then just wants her to like, you know, see the truth of her situation.
It's interesting with Futaba because you get so much exposition about Futaba. It's almost like incomparable to any other character who you get to know and that's part of the reason, you know, you're going through her palace. And I guess because she kind of has a personal connection because she's with Sojiro, and I mean, that entire palace is about her. And so she's like kind of unprecedented in the sense of all the other characters, that you really get this really deep look into her specifically that isn't only accessed through a social link. Because you have her social link on top of everything you get from her palace, which obviously you don't get with anybody else unless you include the characterization of like Ryuji or Morgana or whoever through their specific palaces. So we got that palace, and then Okumura, which they basically completely did his palace so that it was a little more simple to get through. Okay, I here's the thing: is a lot of people hate the part with Morgana and Ryuji and Haru and Morgana leaving. And don't get me wrong,
I think a lot of the issue is that it takes away from Haru's story. That's the argument I've seen, which I can agree with. It's like, yeah, it did just kind of take away of learning more about Haru, which is where the joke of Haru didn't get her screen time came from.
Right.
And
yeah.
it just she also just comes so late in the story, kind of like Naoto and Persona 4. She kind of comes in later because she's like their last party member. But they did a good job with Naoto kind of showing her.
Yeah, she almost takes the reins of everything by the time she shows up.
Yeah.
But Haru, you know, she's there in the palace, and then she kind of fades into the background, and I understand that. Don't get me wrong. But I don't actually have any issues with the parts with Ryuji and Mona, because they've always...
I didn't really either.
I always actually kind of like... In fact, I think it's one of my favorite parts of the story, which everybody's going to be like, are you kidding me? But I don't know. I like seeing that conflict between Ryuji and Mona actually add up to something, because they've hated each other up to that point, more or less.
I mean, it had been building up, and it would have been weird if, like, you know, they didn't have some sort of argument. Not necessarily those two, but, like, just in general, because a lot of storytelling comes from characters having conflict. I mean, you wouldn't have a story if characters didn't have conflict, because characters really are the ones who decide what the story's gonna be in the end. Because here's the thing, you could have the most amazing story ever, but if your characters are boring, no one's gonna care about your story.
Right. And you could make the argument that Mona, you know, really jumped the gun when he left the Phantom Thieves. I get that, but I think it was supposed to be more like it was out of anger and frustration, and he wasn't thinking rationally, and so, but once he made the decision, he kind of had to stick with it. And I really like all that stuff where you're running into them in the palace, and they have to prove themselves, and you know, you meet Haru and she introduces herself, and da-da-da-da-da, and of course you have to confront Maruki or not Maruki, sorry, Okumura, and I do like that they did a little more with Haru there, where what he thinks of her, kind of get a better idea of, he just thinks of her as
I'm kind of glad they
something
brought
he can
in...
pawn off, and is his, I don't know, she does his bidding, I guess.
I guess I kind of like in his boss fight that a cognitive version did exist, because it was like, I know a few people, myself included, and I know Morgana kind of talked about it in, like, I think base Persona 5, she's like, where's my cognitive self? And he's like, you probably don't want to know.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of glad they kind of brought it up. Even if it was just for the boss fight.
My father's logic has no flaws. That line got so annoying pulling through that boss battle.
Oh my gosh, I know, yeah.
Oh jeez. Anyhow, and then of course Shido. Sae's palace was pretty much, I think they said was it shorter? I don't remember. But that
it was shorter because they shortened the maze. Because I remember I was like, I thought this maze was harder.
Yeah, though they did the same with when you get to Shido's ship. They made some of those easier to get through too.
Thank goodness. I remember I did not have fun in his palace. I was just like, when is this over?
And so, of course, Shido's palace, you know, you fight Shido, and then you fight Akechi, and then you fight Shido, and Akechi doesn't, well, he does die, but he doesn't die, and you have the glove thing, and
you still don't know at the end of the game. They left it a cliffhanger. It's like, everyone wanted to know this was supposed to answer stuff. I think it's kind of funny that they did that again. Almost like I'm almost okay with it just for the fact that it makes me laugh. That everyone's like, we're finally gonna get answers, and then
Yeah.
we still don't know.
But going back to Shido, I mean, his boss battle's cool when you get to do that one-on-one battle with him, and it's just you and him.
That was cool.
That was cool, and that was kind of cathartic. But Shido is one of those villains where it's like, I can't hate Shido because I don't know Shido. All I know is that he's a politician, and that's it. That's about all I know about. And he had all these people killed, but like, I don't have a personal connection to him, and this is kind of a problem. I think one of my biggest problems with Persona, and I understand why it's this way, because you couldn't really do much about this. But the larger the target, the less personal it felt the connection was.
It did, yeah. Like, I would say the beginning of the game, like, you know, with Kamoshida, like, he was straight up disgusting and despicable, like, just horrible, but he has, like, such a connection with An and Ryuji, and you're just like, oh, let's take this jerk down.
Yeah, you hate Kamoshida. He's such a jerk. And
it's like, it just meant so much more, and just all the build up, even like with Shiho and everything, and you're just like that was like the final straw, and you're like, okay, let's do this.
Which I think is also a good thing, because if you start with a villain that you have a personal connection to, that you hate, that's a well-written villain that just is scummy, then it really makes you like want to get through that first palace. But by the time you hit the Shido, he's just like, I will steer this country. And it's like, oh my gosh, this guy is speaking in the most vague of imagery. Anyhow, you fight Shido, but that little bit made it feel like, okay, this kind of feels like, it kind of helps you remember that little issue from the beginning where he got you in trouble and he's responsible for all of this, but he doesn't know it. And I guess it's supposed to be a sign of how much power he holds. It's like that scene in, what is it, Avengers, where it's like Thanos is like, I can't even remember who it is, but somebody comes up to them and they're like, you did this to me, and he's like, I don't even know who you are. And it's like that's pretty much how I feel about Shido. Is you like start attacking him and all doing all this stuff.
And he doesn't remember
like,
you until like halfway through the battle or whatever.
Right. Exactly.
And it's like, oh wait, I do remember you.
Yeah, and maybe that's the whole reason it's supposed to be that way. Is he's not supposed to think anything of you. He's supposed to think he's supposed to think of you as a rat, because you all get turned into rats. So I guess it makes sense in context. It's fine. It's just sometimes I wish that
there would have been more of a build-up. I mean, I guess they tried to use Akechi to make that personal connection with Shido, but it's like also Akechi was also the villain. So I don't know.
It's very hard to.
And mostly it's this falls into the show don't tell aspect. A lot of times you need to show, because like again with Kamoshida, you saw how terrible he was. I mean, you did also just hear like just.
But you saw the effects talking about it,
but you also saw how he treated you in the game.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, but with Shido, you just mostly hear everything from Akechi. He just tells you. You don't actually necessarily see it. I mean, you get the little clips where it cuts into, ha ha ha, we're so evil in our office. Let's talk about our plan.
They do the largest exposition dump of all time, while also like chuckling about how evil they are and how they're like, but that wasn't the most evil thing I did. Then I did, and they're just literally spilling all the beans. And in no other situation than exposition in a story would you ever have characters have a conversation like that. That is still by far one of the worst written scenes in any form of media, but it's also hilarious because you know they were writing this with the intention of you being like, they're so evil.
I love how they're just talking about this. Like, they were talking about how did we come to this point.
That's right, because they have to go all the way. They're like, but I wouldn't have gotten here if it wasn't for when you did this. Ah, you're too nice. But remember that time when I did this? Yeah, you're right. It's so unnatural. It's just so out of... And I'm sure there's other scenes like that I'm not giving credit to. But that scene specifically...
SIU director in every phone call.
Yeah, that scene specifically really sticks out, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
That comes to another issue with us with Persona 5 is they should have kept things more of a mystery. They shouldn't have really done the cutaways to the bad guys.
Right. I mean, they didn't
Persona
really
5 wasn't
add much.
meant to. I don't know if it was just our view because of Persona 4 that everything was supposed to be a mystery. I mean, it didn't cut to the culprit being like, I just shoved someone through the TV.
And you didn't see him like walking around in the background. Well, okay, wait a second. But you didn't see him like walking around in the background like, you know, doing very super suspicious.
Like overly in your face.
Right, like, yeah, there were hints, don't get me wrong. I guess you could make that argument.
If you knew the anime tropes and everything, and at the time, like they said in base Persona 4, he didn't have a social link, which made him automatically suspicious.
Yeah, I guess we're giving it away as we say this.
But...
yeah, you're right.
But, yeah, like, that gave tips away, but he at least tried to hide it. There was an attempt.
Mm-hmm. And I guess Akechi did, but like, come on. Like, did who had played that and was surprised? I'm sure that isn't supposed. I think the twist is supposed to be that they knew the entire time that it was him.
Yeah, I think that was the twist they were building up, is that they knew that he was behind everything and how, like, you know, just basically how Joker cheats death was supposed to be the twist. Which I did find cool. Don't get me wrong.
Honestly, like, it's interesting, but it's also like, that's the twist. Like, it kind of falls flat once you realize that Akechi really is the villain. You're like, oh, wait, he is? I thought they were going to play him off as, like, somebody who had access to the metaverse, but was, like, secretly tracking the, you know, the real killer.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean, it would have been interesting. Like, what if Akechi was just a red herring the whole time? That would have been interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I would have really
like,
liked
they make him overly suspicious, and then later it's like, no, I'm just actually a detective. I'm just really trying to be a good person, and you're just like, oh.
Right.
You just act really shady, though.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, Persona 4 does a lot of like, oh, this person is it. Oh, no, it's actually this person. Oh, no, wait, it's actually this person. So maybe they were like, we got to take a step back.
I mean, and I guess Persona 4 was supposed to be more of the mystery, and maybe we're putting too much of that into Persona 5, because Persona 5 technically isn't, I mean, I guess it is trying to find, like, you know, the culprit behind stuff.
Right.
But that isn't until they were, like, framed where they're like, okay, now we have to clear our name, we need to figure out, because they kind of sort of cared about Black Mask. Not really, though. They're just like, they kept getting hints. They're like, oh, there's someone with a black mask running around, but they're like, oh, let's not really look into it very much. Mm-hmm. They're like more concerned about getting their targets. And I feel like that was more, so maybe it isn't fair to see Persona 5 as like it needed to be a mystery.
One of my favorite parts is like when you get to the part with the when you first see the Black Mask culprit and they walk out and you instantly know that it's Akechi, because the way he walks and he shoots the gun and he has like his hand on his hip and you're like, nobody would stand like that except Akechi. And it's like, it's so obvious at that point, and he's like super skinny, and again, half the characters are, but anyhow, I guess we're talking a lot about Persona 5 base game. We're probably losing track. We should probably finish up here, but overall, I really like Persona 5 Royal. I like the new additions. I like the Baton Pass additions, the boss additions, the will seeds. Did you have any? I
like the will seeds. I got all the will seeds, and they really became really cool items, and it made everyone have like something equipped.
And it made you think of something other than just getting to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And the items you could get from it were always really nice.
I really liked I forget what the item's specifically called, but it's the one you get from Kanashiro's palace. It's this big bolt thing wall that you get, and it just really raises your defenses. That saved
I know what you're talking
about.
So
much grief in some battles later on. I was like, time to use this.
Some of them felt like overpowered. Some of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think you get like the Lion's Pride or whatever that thing was called from Shido.
Oh yeah, because I think that raises your attack.
I used that for sure in some places.
Some of them just act like moves you could get, like charge and things.
Yeah, I definitely used way more buffs and debuffs in my second playthrough, which again made things way easier.
One thing that made me mad about Royal, because I abused status effects in Golden. They were like my best friend in Golden.
Oh,
and in Royal,
they really
when I tried to do
nerfed
that,
a lot of status
last,
elements.
like a turn, or unless they get like attacked, and all of a sudden they're like, "I'm better now," and it's like, what's the point of using a status effect?
Yeah, well, yeah, there were certain ones where it was like really pointless. It felt like,
I mean, I guess
like
the
I could
point
see it
is
doing
that you
with
could get
certain
a-
status ailments. But then there were other status elements where it's like, this isn't even worth it if it doesn't even last more than a turn.
Yeah, I guess the point was so you could get the technical damage, but I'm like, I kind of just like them not being able to attack me if I can.
Right, I like the RNG of, you know, them being asleep or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's something that's kind of fun about that. Even if the RNG isn't necessarily in your favor in situations like that.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I don't know. There's something that I think needed to be adjusted there. I guess they were trying to counterbalance it to make it so that you wouldn't have that much power. But then they'll give you other things that give you a ton of power. So who knows? But overall, I think, you know, we both really enjoyed Persona 5 Royal. I think we had a pretty good time with it.
I really liked it. It's probably one of my favorite games I've played, especially in like recent years.
Sure.
I mean, I know we were just ripping on base Persona 5 for like 20 minutes, but even with all that, like, I still really like the game. Like, I know some people, it's like, definitely, I've seen arguments that it's probably like, I've seen people say it's like one of the best written games, and I've seen people say it's the weakest of the games.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty easy to please as a person, and I don't think it necessarily did anything like super offensive, even if like, you know, you can figure some things out on your own. I still liked it because I like a lot of the characters, and I think that's where a lot of the charm comes from. And the gameplay is really fun. So
yeah, there's so much more to the game than just the story that makes it enjoyable. You know, it's everything from the art to the gameplay to the collection of the personas and the battles themselves and the little bit of strategy that's there, and, you know, all the interactions with all the characters, and, you know, just kind of slowly building up all these cool connections and getting all these abilities. There's just something that's fun about all of that combined together, and it feels like, you know, it's this weird mix between an RPG and a social simulator, and you get this really cool hybrid of a game that kind of takes the best of both worlds and puts them together. So I think all in one package is what makes it great. It's not necessarily because of one thing or the other. So even if one thing is lacking here, it probably makes up for it in another aspect.
Yeah, we just tend to talk about story because lately I notice I like a lot of games more with story now.
Right. Yeah.
But I'll play a lot of games that aren't necessarily story focused.
Yeah. So I think overall we both liked it. I mean, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's still the highest rated game on, what is it, Metacritic? I don't know, something. It has like the highest score review for this year, which is cool. It's still higher than I think even Last of Us 2.
That's crazy.
So, best reviewed game this year, even better than Final Fantasy VII. So,
that's
I guess
really
we'll see.
Crazy.
Yeah. Well, Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know, it had a passionate fan base that had a lot of expectations, and we're probably going to be set off by anything anyhow. So, I guess I can understand. But then again, it's also not a fair comparison considering Persona 5 Royal is based on Persona 5 base. So, I don't know. But it's interesting nonetheless. So, well, I think that'll conclude it for our discussion. We've gone for almost 2 hours. So, I'm sorry if this isn't something you guys are interested in, but we would like to do more discussions. I would really like to discuss. I have a lot of different ideas, anything from talking about other games to talking about Persona 3 remake maybe happening, or what's
Persona
for the
6.
future of Persona 6, what's for the future of the Persona series in general, and also other games. I would like to cover other games. But right now, Persona is just one of those things that's just kind of fun to talk about, and I'm very interested in getting integrated into the Persona community. So I think we'll do more of that. Plus, you can totally expect us to do more videos in the vein of Persona 5 Royalist Summary and Parody. So if you like that, we are talking
we'll probably
about...
make one for Scramble when that comes out.
Yeah, definitely. And we might focus more on the bits than the review.
Summary.
Because I think a lot of people just liked the memes, which
Yeah.
I personally, when I was editing that video, I was like, okay, because I worked so long on the animations. I worked on the animations longer and all the joked bits for much longer than everything else. I think I edited like the rough cut of all the narration in like a day or two. All that I took care of in a day. The majority of the video didn't take long to put together. It was all the other stuff. The little
I know. I
animations
also
and
had
things.
I had to think that Sprader's resource, where I got all the talking heads and actually like really good quality.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest character to make talk was Joker, because he doesn't have any animation. He doesn't have talking animation. So
Right.
I had to grab it off this mobile game that only came out in Japan, and they only had him in like the one outfit, and I was just like, I don't really want to know if I want to redraw all his outfits.
Right.
So that's kind of why he didn't have like the multiple outfits like everyone else. But I had to look through all the other sprites to see, like, get him at like the right facial angle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna copy this mouth, and then I'm gonna edit it to fit more on his face. And that's basically what I did. So that took way longer because I had to do it for each of his expressions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was actually, it was a fun challenge, and I have more of appreciation for people who work on video games. Even just from doing that, I'm like, no wonder these games take so long to make.
Yeah, I know. I was doing this video, I'm like, this is what, 40 minutes of just jokes and stuff, roughly. And for the parts that I had to do all the talking heads and stuff, and I'm like, man, if this is taking me 3 months to put this crappy thing together with just a few PNGs that are just wobbling and some talking heads, I'm like, I can only imagine how long it takes to do a freaking 100-hour RPG with multiple bosses and fights and social links and conversations and just so much dialogue. I mean, I can't think of any games that have that much dialogue other than Persona. I'm sure there are some, but like really Persona takes
Any
the cake.
RPG, really.
Yeah. And I'm just like, this is crazy. I can't imagine how they get this all done. But then again, I guess I was the only one who was really working on the video part of it. So that could be an aspect, is there's only one of me, and I was doing it in a very inefficient way too. So if we do more, we're probably going to do a lot of standalone little things we've talked about.
We're probably gonna do like more bits, but they're gonna be a lot shorter.
Yeah, maybe release them individually. Like, we were talking about doing a bit with that thing at the end, Goro and Ren. First, that was just a dumb joke, but now I'm thinking, oh, it'd be fun to do a little series where we just do stuff between them. And I might do something like that. Well, I probably will. And we've already talked about some little ideas for that. So
we started making an idea for a new bit, because now we're like, because we're not just poking fun at the game where there's already content, we have to make the content.
Right, so we have to come up with some dumb little ideas. So we might put out little episodes and stuff of just original dumb stories that obviously I don't have to say this, but none of this is canon. This is all just made up dumb stuff that until Persona 5 Scramble comes out, I don't think you'll see, unless we do some of the other Persona games. Or
I think it'd be interesting if maybe we covered, yeah, or maybe like Persona 4 or Persona 3. That'd be kind of funny.
Yeah, eventually I'd like to. I will warn people that I have classes that are going to start up soon. I'm sure a lot of you do too, but it will slow down the pace of things. So that's why I wanted to do stuff like this too, so that my channel, now that we have 100 some subscribers, which is new for me, it's very big for me. I wanted to do discussions like this. I know there's tons of channels that do this already. I'm sorry. This is just an outlet for me, and I think it would be fun to just do this. Maybe do some news updates when new stuff is announced for Atlas. Maybe reactions. We'll see what happens. This channel is probably just going to be a hodgepodge of things, probably primarily related to stuff like Persona. But I like a lot of games. We definitely like Sega stuff. I don't know why. Like, my favorite things are like Persona, Yakuza. We both really like Sonic.
Yeah.
And there will be anything Nintendo, I'm sure I will, if that direct actually happens, I'm sure we'll do something about that too. Anyhow, that's about it for us, so I think we'll wrap up. So we will talk to you guys later.
Yep. Bye.